We're good? Cool. Woo. So I want to talk about something I've come up with called incentive pools. It's really a bunch of pretty fundamental ideas that we're kind of repackaging. I'm trying to sell to you guys, and how we can get to a model of results-based funding in the Treasury. In this, I'll kind of talk about what is the purpose. Hang on a sec. Sorry, my slides are a little bit out of order. Here we go. So I'll talk a little bit about the limitations of the current kind of Treasury status quo, and that's not really like the OpenGov or the code. It's kind of more like our cultural practices around how we do Treasury proposals and what we're capable of as a community. I'll talk about the components of incentive pools, there are three: commission, cash flow, and accountability. And hopefully, we can incite an interesting discussion. And if you have any questions, I'd love to know. So currently the Treasury process looks a bit like this. It's like airport security. Show us what's in your bag. We don't trust you. In a trustless ecosystem, we obviously need a process to protect the community and ensure safety. And so it's largely focused on litigating and auditing existing proposals to make sure that there's nothing dangerous that can damage the network, and that there isn't sort of what we call, it's not a proposal of what we might call a grifter, which is somebody who's asking for value greatly in excess of the value they're actually going to generate for the ecosystem. But despite the fact that OpenGov has multiple tracks, and we recognize the fact that different referenda require different work to assess and judge, we kind of have this one practice for Treasury proposals where we expect them all to be the same. And I would call this the Treasury status quo. So there's limitations to the Treasury status quo, and I need to unpack some of them so that we can have a framing for what a vision of the future might look like. So there's a few limitations. The first is that all of the Treasury proposals we see are structured on a cost-plus basis, meaning that the way that we pay for work is based on the input costs of the work. So if I want to run an event, it's like, what's the cost of venue hire? What's the cost of catering? Or if I want to build some software, the amount of money that I can get, it depends on what I can convince the Treasury I need in terms of software engineers and designers. And so that's the first thing. The second is the success criteria is based on whether or not work items are completed, and not whether they generate the expected value. So we might tell a grand story about the work that we're going to do in the Treasury. Here's why we're creating this piece of software, but the success criteria is not based on that expected impact. And so this is just this works for some things and not other things, but we use it for everything. And it also creates some perverse incentives, in my opinion, when you look at this across iterated games. So what is it not good for? Well, structuring a proposal based on the cost of the inputs is not very good when the inputs are not known to get an output, right? So this sounds a bit silly to say out loud, but things that are indefinite, where the means by which we accomplish an outcome is indefinite, it's not very good for that. If I said to you, create me a decentralized social media network and get 1 million users, you would not be able to construct a proposal that enumerated every single step along the way. You would need to iterate and experiment. You would need to derive new knowledge. You need to figure out how to do it, and you need to have a plan for how you figure it out, but you would not be able to enumerate some omniscient being every step that's going to unfold, right? And so this is kind of idealistic but not very practical. It's very good for building software which implements Web3 technology. It's not very good for building products which gain traction and adoption that leverage Web3 technology. Secondly, there's some kind of long-term perverse incentives. The first is when we base the cost of work based on the input costs, we create a perverse incentive for people to do things with more resources rather than fewer. So the way that I get access to more Treasury funding is I increase the amount of things that I'm willing to spend money on. And that's not very good. It also means that when we're looking for Treasury funding, for teams that depend on Treasury funding, there is more attention spent marketing to the DOT community and the governors and telling these fanciful stories about the ultimate impact of our software, but we don't. But instead of doing this indefinite work, creating new knowledge, talking to users, figuring out what the market wants, right? And so this creates an existential risk, which I think is well managed by our current airport security process. But we have a growing cost center, but we don't have traction and users and profits to match that growing cost center. And so it just leads to initiatives being cut and deleted, but there's no real path forward for how those teams participate constructively in the ecosystem. So let's have a few caveats. This is what I believe, and this is how I think about things. I think Web3 is an ideology. We want to build Web3 systems because we want these systems with strong economic guarantees to exist, because they are going to provide some human prosperity and benefit in the future. And even if the market does not want these tools and systems today or tomorrow, we still need to fund them. Otherwise, we're not doing anything, right? When we're just doing, we might as well be just trying to make as much money as we can, trying to create the next TikTok or try to make a stronger version of cannabis, right? So it's definitely necessary to fund the Web3 vision, even if there is insufficient market demand for these solutions. But we can't only do this. We can't only build the stuff we think is cool. We also have to talk to users and talk to the market and figure out how to systematically push Web3 solutions into the world. So this is what I'm hoping incentive pools or something like it can accomplish, at least in terms of how we leverage our treasury resources to accomplish this goal. So there are incentive pools are a way to do what I'm calling results-based funding, which is probably what all funding should be. It's very similar to commission-based salary packages that salespeople earn, or the equity salary packages of early startup employees, because most of the upside comes from generating results, the expected value, rather than getting paid on a per work basis. And these also incentive pools are useful for creating demand for the DOT token, because the treasury can't take an equity stake in everyone's company. So people can't, the treasury can't just give them capital and allow them to go in whatever direction they want. We need to align incentives between the DOT token holders and ecosystem teams in order to fund them on a recurring basis. So there are three components. The first is commission, the second is cash flow, and the third is accountability. And these are really just things that they're very high-level principles. This is not a proposal for a new system, like a new parachain palette. This is just, almost like a mental model, something that I'm trying to instill in the community as like tribal knowledge that we can use to make some better decisions. So let's look at commission. Commission is a reward for generating results or meeting KPIs. Understandably, the value that you're creating, the result you're generating that's measured by a KPI, should create more value. It should be valuable in excess of the cost of commission. So then we get a positive feedback loop, right? We invest our money, we get a return, we can invest more money, capitalism. Also this incentivizes teams to focus on results, right? So we can have teams can have a persistent goal that they can continue to compound, traction towards, rather than constantly focusing their attention on accruing the necessary political influence to get their next proposal through to stay alive, right? You can think about, we use game theory and incentives to understand what's going to happen in decentralized networks, so I don't think it's like particularly radical to say that people want to maximize the amount of treasury funding that they're going to get, right? But what we also want people to be doing is generating the maximum value in excess of that investment. So the goal of incentive pools is just to align incentives between the treasury and treasury participants so that they can pursue the maximum reward, and in doing so they generate the maximum value for the ecosystem. The second component is cash flow. So cash flow is a reward for participating in a pool and doing work to try and accomplish a result. By having, at the moment we kind of litigate every expense and every work item that teams intend to get funded for, but by having some funding to work in an autonomous way, teams can again focus on results and they can take risks, they can iterate and ideate, all while having a persistent goal through commission. So commission provides a persistent target, while cash flow provides the means by which teams can iterate and ideate and change their approach when new information emerges, right? Cash flow probably needs to reflect the needs of the recipient. So it shouldn't be so much money that they can accomplish all of their financial goals, because you want the commission to to sort of define their North Star. But it should probably be like roughly what they need, to cover their expenses, or maybe a little bit less. So there is some danger and some urgency taking people towards getting that commission. And when you receive cash flow, it shouldn't be, every time you get paid, it shouldn't be litigated through the treasury. It's like incentive pools are something which is a little higher trust, and it is a bit more akin to hiring an employee. And it's like you don't ask your employee to reapply for their job every month. This is just a huge distraction, right? But obviously there should be a very thoughtful attempt to litigate any proposal to create an incentive pool. It's like negotiating a salary. Like, it's a big deal, right? And the treasury is going to want the best possible deal, and the participant is going to want the best possible deal, and we have to come to consensus. Finally, there is accountability. So this is the means by which we ensure people act in a way to get results that actually does generate the expected value, rather than accomplishes the results in some sort of alternative way, which is not really the purpose of the incentive pool, right? So we need a way of managing cheating and cheese strategies. And so in traditional organizations, you have managers who oversee your work and make sure you're on the right track and help you and support you. And you also have employment termination. If you're not generating results, if you're not a team player, you get terminated. And so in incentive pools, there's a similar proposition. The current referenda that we have in the Treasury is proposing the use of the bounties palette. And so bounty curators can decline to pay. There still exists the cudgel of non-payment to keep people aligned, but here we actually have also a goal and a purpose, right? And so there's also because this is a more trusted system, you might lose the ability to participate in this system in the future if you do cheat. So there's a loss of credibility and future treasury income. Also, teams can provide other insights or analytics, or open up their companies to provide information with their balance sheet. There's ways we can leverage transparency with bounty curators in order to ensure that there's trust. And also you can have long vesting periods, so you can make sure that people are incentives aligned. If they're earning a really large commission for valuable work, we make sure that that's going to vest over multiple years, like you would see with a startup. And so in any system, each incentive pool you can think of a little bit like a game, wherein essentially there's going to be a different win condition, and there's going to be a different set of rules, and thus the way in which you would cheat was always going to be different, and the way in which you would have a cheese strategy. For anyone who doesn't know what I mean by cheese strategy, if you've ever played video games on the couch with a friend, and you're playing like a fighting game, and they just do that, they just mash B, and they do that one strategy that works, but it's really frustrating, and it doesn't really make the game fun. People don't get the expected value. That's what a cheese strategy is. So these are really just principles. Commission, cash flow, and accountability are things that we need to talk about and be able to discuss if we're going to have something like results-based funding in the Treasury. And so I think it's useful to maybe adopt some language like this. So if someone wants to create an incentive pool, rather than sort of saying, no, big spend, bad, we say, I think the commission that they're receiving is in excess of the expected value, and it should probably be lowered. Or the commission and the cash flow that they're receiving, maybe you'd call cash flow salary as well, if you were better at naming things than me. The commission and cash flow are fine, but we actually don't have enough insight into what's going on in this company. There's not enough accountability to be able to see that we're actually getting the expected value and not getting some fake version of it. This is not a one-size-fits-all solution. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to incentives, but we can try and make something like incentive pools with the Treasury. It's going to require that we all become a little bit more advanced and we skill up in how we think about Treasury funding. We don't just use the same template that has been provided and has sort of mimetically become the standard. So I want to talk very briefly. What I just went through is basically a video that I've put together, and so there's also the topic of Tailsman has created a referenda for implementing the first incentive pool called the Genesis Incentive Pool, and I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it because I have not created a presentation as thorough and clear as what you just saw for that. But what I want to talk to, I want to have a bit of an open discussion, and we can pass the mic around in terms of how can we apply this system? So the pitch in general for the Tailsman incentive pool is that we've been listening to the market and we've talked to users and we've made something that works. We have some software that does a pretty good job of turning curious people into stakers, but we need funding in order to continue to iterate and compound the effectiveness of what we've built. We can't just get funded on a per feature basis because what the treasury might want us to build does not reflect the need that we actually see in the market, right? And so that's what we're asking for. And so has anyone seen what this is before? Hands up if you know what that is. A couple of hands. This is called a business model canvas. It's a really simple tool for enumerating a simple business plan in like 30 minutes. You outline what's the point of your company? What is the value proposition that you're actually delivering? How will you distribute your product to customers? How are you going to market it? Where is your funding going to come from, etc. These are how are you going to generate revenue? So that's what this is. This is a very common tool, and I think like something and this is where the presentation ceases to be nicely designed, is I've created something akin to like an incentive pool model canvas, right? These are questions that we're going to have to ask if we want to have results-based funding. So first of all, what's your value proposition as a company? What's the point? What is the benefit to Polkadot? Because as mentioned, the treasury cannot take an equity stake in your project, and so therefore what you do has to accrue value for the network and for the DOT token. How do you measure success, right? It can't just be vibes, right? What are the KPIs? What are the metrics? And what should the commission be? So what should the treasury be willing to pay for something like this? And then in terms of cash flow, we have like, what are the key activities? Like what are actually the input costs to doing this iterative work? What kind of work is it? What kind of cash flow is required? Like I said, it should probably not be in excess of all of your expenses. It maybe is the same or a little bit less. And what's the minimum expectation that you continue to receive cash flow, right? Like if I hired a commission-based salesperson to sell my product, but they sold no products, I wouldn't keep them on staff forever. I'm de-risking my investment in them by making them commission-based. I'm putting a lot of risk onto them, but also I can't have a bunch of people who are not generating any value, right? And then finally, in terms of accountability, what is relevant here? No pictures, thank you. Yeah, I don't go on the internet with my face. Thank you. So what are the ways in which this commission structure can be exploited? What are the cheat and cheese strategies? And then simply just what can we implement to have no doubts like that you're not doing that? And this is always going to be fit for purpose. So this is the Tailsman. This is the Tailsman Genesis pool answers for this incentive pool business model canvas, right? Well, what's our value proposition? We make it easy to participate in Polkadot by providing user-friendly software, great customer support, and a friendly community to help. How does that benefit Polkadot? Well, we're able to turn Polkadot curious people into stakers. Participating in Polkadot both drives demand, and also the people in our community go on to pursue their own initiatives and ventures and trying to accrue more value in the ecosystem. How do we measure success? Well, the bottom of our user growth funnel is like people putting in our nomination pool, because that's how we want to build our business. So new dots staked for 6 months at least in the Tailsman pool. And then also the conversion rates that we measure between different stages, like from you just installed, you funded the account, you've done a transaction, you've connected to a DApp, etc. There's going to be a pathway there that we want to optimize over time. And then what should the commission be? We're saying 25% of each dot that gets staked from a unique browser. Cash flow. What are the key activities? Well, we're doing this like iterative product design. We create new product pitches every 6 weeks in our development cycle. We do software development, we do QA, we do user testing, we do customer support, we do marketing. It's a whole bunch of things to make this thing tick. And so here's a number here's a number from the proposal. What's the minimum expectation? Whoopsie, I haven't filled this one in. What's the minimum expectation for Tailsman to keep receiving cash flow? That's a good question. Like, we should answer that. What does the community expect? At what point are we actually willing to pull the rug out and say that this company is not actually effective at generating results? Accountability. How could we cheat? if we got paid on a commission for every dot in our pool, well, there's a bunch of interesting ways to cheat. I could have a big bag of secret money, and I could make a bunch of fake users. I could use the commission I'm receiving to bribe someone for liquidity. I could pass the commission on to the user to create an unfair staking reward. I can wash the dot through through a pool again and again and again, and the same dot can give us 5 commissions. So we kind of have to get to a point here where we're almost implementing like some sort of legal clause, like operative provisions on how we manage this pool. So how do we ensure that all this nonsense is not going to take place? Well, we have curators who we will share our analytics with, and they'll have insight into our real usage, and they'll be able to refuse to pay us. We'll provide the commission will be vested over multiple years, so we can't just give it to someone. We can't use it to bribe someone, and we need it. The cash flow is not in excess of our expenses, and so we need it in order to survive. Maybe it's necessary for the treasury to understand the balance sheet of Tailsman in order to collaborate with Tailsman. Dot has to be staked for at least 6 months, so you can't do 4. You can't just wash lots of dot. Anyway, let's look at another one. Let's look at Polk assembly, right? These are conversations that I don't really see in the community where we're sort of actually establishing a vision. I see a lot of like sort of outsourcing the vision to like the founders of the ecosystem, the people that have a lot of status and have been in the ecosystem for a while, but we need to have a vision for our own products and companies. So what's the value proposition of Polk Assembly? Well, it's the town square for OpenGov. It's a place for people to easily submit and review proposals. We can make it easy for the community to have healthy discourse, to collaborate, and there's also like this social graph of voters that we want to make it easy to explore so people can do politics effectively. What's the benefit to Polkadot? Well, it improves discourse and comprehension of proposals, improves voter turnout, and should improve, in theory, the return on investment that we actually get for our dots, because we're more easily able to make competent decisions. So how would you measure success? This is a really interesting question to me. Maybe like improved participation, more comments, more likes, more proposal opens, video watches, etc. per site view. You know, like how well are they actually converting people's attention and leveraging it effectively? How many user interviews have they conducted? How much actual feedback have they integrated from the users in order to improve the product and discover existing pain points? Improved Kano score. So Kano is a measure of customer satisfaction that is like, you guys can look that up. There's something that we use at Tailsman. Maybe it's like the number of votes executed via Polk assembly. What should the commission be? Obviously, we have to decide on one of these measures. I don't run Polk assembly, right? What are the key activities? Probably similar to Tailsman. And then how do we ensure accountability? Maybe the Kano survey is implemented by curators or a third party. So it's not just Polk assembly trying to get a whole bunch of fake positive sentiment. Maybe they have to openly publish their user research and show the user interviews that they have done and what the signal that they're getting. And then like as a community as well, this is like we can have input. Multics, Thibaut's amazing multi-sig solution. They make it easy to create and manage multi-sigs and execute transactions. How does this benefit Polkadot? Well, anyone can more easily self-custody in a super secure way. It means more businesses and organizations can get into Polkadot because you can't just be passing around a private key if you're a company. You can't use externally owned accounts. How do we measure success? I think it's probably very similar to Tailsman, like the number of unique users to import a multi-sig, maybe something funky around like reducing the bounce rate or the conversion rate of onboarding, improving the conversion rate of onboarding or the transaction flow. What we could see if we had the open access to Multix's like analytics, we would be able to see of the multi-sig transactions that are performed on chain, what market share does Multix have, and is it going up or is it going down? Also, this Kano score of like customer satisfaction. What should the commission be? Maybe it's maybe it's a reward for reaching a certain amount of assets under management, like a predefined amount of AUM. What is the minimum expectation to keep receiving cash flow? Same questions, but like you can see how we can start to plot out through this like mental model of like what's the expected value and what do we pay for it? What's really the required investment that the treasury has to make? Like, the cash flow is the part that the treasury is really risking, as long as the commission is generates value in excess of its costs. And then how do we trust? What's the accountability? So our current proposal, it's a bit bonkers, like the level of engagement. This is a really hard to grasp idea. There's a lot of information, but we have YouTube comments tier, comments. It's so big spend under big risk nays. There's another account that basically just says that all teams should be equal. It would be bad if some teams had more resources than others. There's a quality of outcome. This doesn't make any sense. And they haven't even read the proposal. They basically, they've said a bunch of things about our proposal that is just completely contradicted. There's one whale who's has 12 million dot, who's basically asking to implement it another way. And I think he's got an interesting point. He's sort of said incentive pools should be available to everyone, right? I don't think this addresses the accountability issue. The accountability component and how you trust is actually really specific to each team. And if you created a completely open incentive system, I think it would be rife with cheating. You would have no means by which you could stop cheating. But the reality is just nobody has really understood or grasped what I'm trying to put out. So this is why I'm presenting today. I really appreciate your attention. Please comment as well. If you I think we have to. What I'm kind of discussing here is how do we actually have better practices and competency as a treasury, rather than just using the same template and then relying on the system that has been built by parity, and then a template for the entire scope of all of our treasury work, right? So what do we need for something like incentive pools to work? We need treasury governors to invest substantial time in contributing to good governance. It's a really big burden of time to actually understand what's going on. If you were to create a company to allocate the amount of money that's in the treasury, you'd hire a lot of people that were really, really talented. You'd delineate work effectively. It would it's a really, really big commitment. And you'd have a lot of accountability and a lot of responsibility. Whereas we have this sort of fleeting attention, everyone paying attention to everything at the same time. Governors are going to need to have basic competency and subject matter expertise in how they in the areas in which they're allocating capital, or we're just not going to see. We're just going to see really silly stuff get funded that confirms our biases, but we're not really, and we're going to see things that accrue in a subversive way. Lots of political influence also get funded, but we're not really going to see the best ideas win unless there's a really huge dedication to discourse and to understanding. And we also need teams to act courageously and voluntarily try to become more commercial, try to become more meritocratic, and pursue a persistent goal across time, and sort of overcome their addiction to treasury money almost. The way in which teams are funded at the moment, it creates a bit of an addiction. There's no real off-ramp from the treasury funding. And so we just have this growing cost center. So yeah, I'm going to kick it over to questions in a sec, but my ask is just that you guys comment what you think honestly on Referenda 150. I think that, I personally feel really intellectually confident about what I've published, but I'm also really willing to be wrong. So far, I'm really unpersuaded by the engagement that I've had so far, which is sort of pretty high noise to signal ratio. Think about in your own projects, what are your own goals and how would you actually measure success and gain traction? What is a KPI that expresses success for your project? And if you have someone with a lot of dot who actually has a lot of influence in the system, tell them to do the same thing. Tell them to express their honest opinion, even if they think this idea sucks. I would really like to see this through to the point where, I would be really happy for Ref 150 to fail if the community really earnestly made a good effort to engage intellectually, and it just wasn't the way, right? That's it. Maybe we could have some Q&A, because I've just peppered you guys with a lot of information.
Hey.
So I've got two thoughts. My first thought is, sounds good. Feels like it needs a UI.
Right.
Maybe not what you're thinking, but just a really simple, hey, here's a tool where you can measure proposals against this? How well does it fill out these criteria? The second one's a bit more in depth. It's like, so that's one vision, right? And that's one structure. But then other people may have different visions for like what's an appropriate structure, and they may be radically different or like slightly different. So I mean, I think like what you're describing feels more product focused. It's like a good way of like
definitely
products, right? But not every proposal is a product. So yeah, what would you? How could you generalize it so that there are different ways, different legitimate ways that like people might measure either for different proposals or even for the same proposal?
This thing, everyone is doing different work, and so we're going to define success differently, and there's going to be different ways to measure things. I think the commission component definitely makes sense for products, but at the very least, anything where the work, the output, the inputs required to actually get a successful result are not known. We need some kind of funding where there's an increased amount of trust given to teams, and thus we're going to need some kind of like social apparatus to facilitate that. Like right now, there exists a bounty called the Polkadot Pioneers bounty, and this is an open bounty to just solve really hard problems that have not yet been solved in the ecosystem. And it's curated by parity, but they give funding to work on these things. They're not asking for someone to explain in every little detail how they're going to solve this thing that nobody knows how to solve, right? So it's for people to have a throw at the stumps. And I think commission makes sense, requires that we come to consensus about a goal that we think actually matters, right? And so maybe, depending on how the stage of the project, commission may or may not be appropriate. But in general, we do need, I believe, the cash flow and accountability component in order to like do things that are indefinite. Otherwise, we're really just depending on parity to do all the work that matters. Anything where the inputs to get the output are unknown, you need to be able to iterate and ideate, and therefore you have to trust someone to iterate and ideate and not just sit on their hands. And so you need a social system of social accountability, which can be backed by bounties.
I guess I'm not asking you to justify or explain your idea, because I think you've done quite a good job of that already. But I'm just saying incentive pools, that is one idea. So is the proposal that is the idea by which proposals are measured, or that there are other ideas that people come up with? And if there are other ideas, other structures that people come up with to measure proposals, how could you like generalize the idea of getting serious about proposals so that each or all of these or some of these different ideas can be taken into account?
Yeah, well, I think largely doing similar things. So there's going to be a best way to approach many different projects. And what I've done is I've sort of created just a system of language that we can define, where we can enumerate all the what is needed to actually structure a proposal in that way. The treasury, because of our headlessness and because we're decentralized, it's very hard for the treasury to assess many, many incredibly diverse and complicated proposals. So we do need some kind of shared language. I think this idea of a business model canvas is like a pretty simple idea. We probably need if we did want to start with incentive pools, we would probably want to create some kind of incentive pool business model canvas and teach people how to use it. What we have at the moment is a template that Parity put out. So we do need other kind of templates, other kinds of structures that are explicit. But maybe we just need we want to outsource, that vision to somebody else. But I feel like the whole point of OpenGov is that we can use our brains and we can coordinate, and really good ideas can emerge, as opposed to, saying outsourcing to someone else to tell us what to do. I don't know. Yeah. Where's the cube? The foam cube. That's a much more fun way to do Q&A.
Hey, thank you for the proposal. So I have two questions. First one is more in the direction of the more common goods versus the money making proposal. So, your examples are more the projects that are perpetually designed to be treasury funded, right? There isn't an exit or a money making in this example. So, but that's not that's kind of an introduction to my question. So, I mean, how do you see it? I mean, the one thing that I'd be interested in seeing is a combination of the more common goods, or the teachers and the firemen of the city, and the money making project. The money making projects have to be defined by an exit. When you make you want to kickstart something with treasury funds, you need to say when you're getting off it, and then how you're not just getting off it and then say, okay, sorry, it didn't work out. How are you making money and bringing the system? So my question really is, can you think of a system in which the common good, the projects that are perpetually on the system, can be correlated, or the KPIs can be correlated with the amounts and just kind of quantified against the money-making projects, such that yes, you're a common goods, you're making this, your poke assembly, you're making everything usable, but if nobody ever makes any money off of it, it's no point. Even if you have churn, like things go through your system. See, that's what I mean, a lot of these incentives or a lot of these KPIs, I mean, I don't mean it in a derogatory way, but churn is just stuff is happening, but there isn't a business growth outside of it. That's what I would like to see in the system like this. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Tailsman specifically intends to off-ramp from treasury money and become sustainable, because that's the nature of what we are. Polk Assembly is a good example. That is like public good, that's infrastructure. And like I said, the commission needs to generate value. The rewards, the commission we pay needs to generate results which are valuable in excess of the commission. And that doesn't necessarily mean that companies eventually have to off-ramp and have business models like Polk Assembly. Like Polk Assembly could still benefit from a commission just to improve the infrastructure, just to make it accomplish some specific outcomes for the ecosystem that do benefit Polkadot. Like in theory, we could still have a commission structure to drive Polk Assembly that makes us wealthier as an ecosystem because we have better infrastructure that makes more people want to participate in Polkadot. Obviously, I think the Treasury's default role is going to be to pay for some of these things. I don't have an opinion on whether Polk Assembly should become privatized or something like that. I'm not sure. That's like a very different, bigger question. But I do think something like both things that do intend to be private and things that do intend to be, I guess, public, can both benefit from an incentive beyond, an incentive to do indefinite work, which we think is going to yield value. Yeah.
I agree. But my question is more like, how do you need the incentive system? What I meant is that there needs to be a correlation. There needs to be a cross-incentive system, way to quantify the business growth with respect to the... See what I mean? I think each incentive pool, in what I'm trying to say, is not its own KPI. Because that doesn't equate. That equates with churn and things happening, but it doesn't equate to business growth of the ecosystem. So in order to do that, you need the incentive. We need those growth, the business growth, like bringing more money into the system, somehow cross. So that's what I feel like.
Yeah.
This system is missing a cross incentive pool. Quantification.
I don't think so, because I think, so for example, we can have a commission instead of just for DOT accumulated in a nomination pool. It could be for liquidity that's brought in from outside of the ecosystem, or users that are brought in from outside of the ecosystem. It's just about how specifically we define our goals. So, again, we just have to be explicit about what the actual goal is. And I think Tailsman, one of the ways we intend to accomplish results and grow our business is by actually bringing users into the Polkadot ecosystem and growing the economy. You couldn't say the same for Polk Assembly, but you can still apply the same ideas, I think. I don't know in terms of particular ways in which we can grow Polkadot, I think you should probably turn to the ecosystem teams who we're currently investing in, and the question should be put to them. How do you intend to generate value for the Polkadot ecosystem in excess of your costs? And how do you do it in a way that's not just zero sum? Are you actually going to go out into a market and disrupt it and accrue wealth in Polkadot for us? I would ask them, rather than sort of trying to figure out this out as a community. Like, what's the one way we do it? Like, the companies we fund should be experiments in finding those answers. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Hey. I would have just two side notes. One would be to the previous question about the common goods, and if they are right object to be part of the incentive pool. I would actually counter that I think incentive pools can actually take care about them very well, because the tragedy of common goods, especially in the Polkadot, is that as usually these common goods, they got grant like a couple weeks or months ago, they are getting like very outdated, especially in the environment of Polkadot, where integrations are breaking and changing very fast. But what we experience a lot in like our lifetime as a project is that even PolkAssembly and a couple of other common goods, sometimes their infrastructure is not stable, or sometimes some promised feature we are waiting on it, or sometimes some core feature even of it like might be broken, like not exactly PolkAssembly, but imagine on case of PolkAssembly that for some reason is voting button broken. And if teams like that, they got just like grant funding, like on time or one time or like continuous time or like multiple times, they might be busy with some other work. So it's like hard to create pressure on them to fix that issue. But with the incentive pool model, if the funding would grow or payout would grow like continuously, but in like enough granular way, the curators can create the pressure like, hey, fix this issue, because otherwise like it can be like cut off. So that would be just like side note for the common good projects, that as an ecosystem we are expecting some like high quality of them, but how they are managing also their expenses and like their own work sometimes is not in the sync of the like current issues, let's say. And another point would be that you nail a couple of issues like very well, and also I can feel it from the community that and in my and in my thoughts about the current state of the ecosystem, that issue is actually one or two layers lower. This is like incentive pools can be like great primitive for resolve many things around treasury and treasury spending, but I think the issue is that we as an ecosystem, we doesn't have like clear or any sort of or any sense of ecosystem growth strategy, which is creating this like very bad mismanagement of the expectations, because random people are coming with the random projects to the treasury, and obviously every proposer, every author of his own or her proposal, he thinks that, oh, I'm going to do for the treasury and for the Polkadot community the best thing ever.
Right.
But the community holders, they sometimes don't understand the topic, or they even like don't like that proposed thing, or like whatever. So there is no clearly defined that we as an ecosystem need, for example, another wallet or another blockchain explorer, and then when these people who thinks that ecosystem crave for it or need it, but in reality ecosystem doesn't really need it or doesn't want it, they are coming to the treasury to ask for the funding, and then either they are like hitting this wall of like rejectment, or even worse is that when is actually the project is like not bad or like not great but not terrible, and they got also some like good feedback from someone, even from Parity or from other teams, that, oh, this might be cool, this would be needed, I would support it for sure, and then those people are like very naively and happy coming to the slaughterhouse of the treasury, and then the random whale is just like absolutely killing or like headshotting the proposal, which is then creating this like frustration, which we also see in the couple of weeks, the recent couple of weeks. So I think that we should go even deeper and start to talk as an ecosystem as much as possible. What we actually want to see as an ecosystem, or how do we want to evolve? That's it.
I think that people will make the best decisions and also should be more and that participate more should also be more relevant in the voting cases. I would expect some kind of reputation because and something that you can lose, because if you don't have anything at stake, you can vote no matter what, and you can vote no matter what even if you don't have any kind of special interest in the proposal somehow. I think that could approach people from having participate when they feel that they have something to say, and basically that's it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm not certain about, in terms of what the OpenGov system needs. I don't have strong opinions about that. I think it needs more engagement. Like, in theory, if like a lot more dot came to the table on proposals like this, we would get a much better signal of like kind of what Jakob was talking about as well, which is like, what's the direction? What do people actually want? There is definitely sort of like a noise issue where we don't know the direction that we're going in, and as a community. And in a decentralized ecosystem, I think there's a fundamental issue with leadership. We're kind of, we're all on our own to some extent. But at the moment, I think that is compounded by this incentive problem where, like, if I ran a company and I had millions of dollars, that I'd raised millions of dollars, and I didn't know what the vision was, I would just give it to all the people who just proposed me stuff, and it would get spent, it would get invested, and so I think we can make a decent, we can fix this a bit by just having a model for results-based funding, right? Even if whales don't make the best decisions, if we just don't culturally accept proposals that could be defined in terms of like what's the expected impact and how do we measure that, and instead we just at the moment the success criteria is not the expected impact. So I think the leadership problem, I kind of feel, the direction problem, I know we all feel this, but really what's happening like at every level of Polkadot is that we're building this system and we're saying it's an open system that people can come and build their business in, and they can leverage this technology to try and create something valuable. And we are outsourcing the vision to other people. It's this weird paradoxical thing that I don't know, I struggle with a little bit. But yeah, this talk is really just about like, let's create, people act because there's incentives and it causes people to act. And we don't need a grand vision for the future necessarily. We don't need to know where we're going. But we certainly can't have these perverse incentives and not really have a vision for where we're going to push us. So, yeah. I feel like my talk has hit everyone's brains in different places, and I really appreciate everyone's attention. Unless there's any more questions, I see like 1 minute on the clock, and I know we took a while to get set up, so we'll probably wrap it up here. But my final ask would be, govern, express your opinion in governance, especially Referenda 150. I'd really appreciate it. And if we do not govern ourselves, we will be governed by somebody. So cheers, mates.
Thank you.